Agree, 100%. They feel like they're getting two players here. And the two biggest needs on this team were corner and then somebody that's going to help Trevor Lawrence, somebody that's going to help the quarterback.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a Wisdom Wednesday with the wisdom coming from my guy, Dane Brugler. Huge fan of his stuff. Can't wait to dive right into it. In fact, Dane is presented by Smirnoff, the world's #1 vodka. Please drink responsibly. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
Well, I think a lot of you know this, but he is one of my favorite guys. I read almost everything that he writes, including already checking out his 2026 mock draft, which is always fun. And as he says, you know, more or less a watch list. I like that Dane couches it in that way. But we got to first talk with my guy, Dane Brugler from The Athletic, who writes The Beast every year. I say this every time he comes on. I'll say it again. He is as close to what the NFL scouts do and what they are as anybody in the media, right? So if you want to see scouting reports that are as close to what the NFL teams do, especially the background. Dane knows how many points they had in their third game of basketball, their junior year of high school. It's unbelievable. And I love it because I love getting the background of these guys. Dane, I'm going to give you a huge blank canvas to start just because I'm curious. Just kind of overall thoughts on the draft, overall takeaways, maybe what surprised you, what didn't in terms of, you know, how things unfolded.
Well, first off, appreciate that intro. It's just fun to be able to talk about after months of educated guesses about projecting these guys. Now it's fun to talk about where they ended up. But it was a fun 3 days of the draft, and I think, you know, quarterbacks they get most of the love, and I think that's how we remember some of the drafts. The way the quarterbacks played out this year, with only 2 in the first round, which honestly wasn't surprising. I only had 2 in my final mock, both Cam Ward at 1 and then Jackson Dart in the 20s. So that played out the way I think we expected. But then on day 2 and day 3, things got really interesting with the order they came off the board. And, of course, Shedeur sliding the round 5, Dylan Gabriel going in the 3rd. So that was really interesting part of all this. And then I think, I mean, for me, I'll probably remember this draft the most for the Jaguars going up to get Travis Hunter. It's a ballsy move from a 34-year-old GM who identified this is going to be a game-changing talent. And, you know, not that that was like a crazy take. A lot of people saw Travis Hunter and said, this guy's different. But to trade a future one, to go up and get a guy like that is incredibly bold, and I mean, good on them to make a move like that. I don't hate it. It's certainly risky. You know, the Jaguars might be picking 9th in the draft next year. Who knows? So, you know, if you're the Browns, they gave him a package it's hard to say no to, especially for a team that, you know, we know they need a quarterback over the next few years. But to me, that was kind of the lasting impact of this year's draft. It was just the boldness of the Jaguars to go get Travis Hunter, and then just the ramifications of that if it does or does not work out.
Totally agree. That's what jumped out to me. I am very surprised that a 34-year-old GM would forfeit his second ever first-round pick next year. You know, Dane, he must have a lot of confidence in how the Jaguars are going to perform this year, and or just how good Travis Hunter really is. And I think, Dane, maybe it's important as anything, they must have a really good plan, they think, to utilize him on both sides of the ball, because I don't think it makes sense otherwise.
Agree, 100%. They feel like they're getting two players here. And the two biggest needs on this team were corner and then somebody that's going to help Trevor Lawrence, somebody that's going to help the quarterback, whatever that looks like, whether it's an offensive lineman or a running back or a pass catcher, whatever. They feel like they address those two big needs with one player. Travis Hunter can start at corner. He can also be a difference maker on offense as in some shape or form, whatever that ends up looking like. So it'll be really interesting because, you don't make this trade. You don't draft Travis Hunter like where you did at number 2 unless you're going to play him both ways and you have a plan in place for how to do that. So all of a sudden, the Jaguars are a lot more watchable for the general fan now compared to what they were last year. And that's even, they have Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas, and like they have fun players on that team. But now, just to see Travis Hunter and how that's going to work on both sides of the ball, that's going to be a lot of fun. And it'll be just as we the next few years, as we look back at that trade, it'll be interesting as we examine it and see maybe who got the best of that move.
Well, and that's why I want to talk about, I'll say this, I call a lot of AFC South games for CBS on the 6th crew. At least I did last year. We'll see what happens this year. I'm all for the Titans getting Cam Ward, the Jaguars, Travis Hunter, the Colts, Tyler Warren, my favorite player in the draft. Like, AFC South just got a heck of a lot more entertaining. I do want to talk about the Browns part of it, though.
Yeah.
You touched on it a little bit. I think the most interesting aspect to me there, Dane, is it feels like Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, they must have a high degree of confidence that they're going to still be there in 2026. Otherwise, you don't make this move if you're them, right?
No question. Look, we all know why they made the move for Deshaun Watson. Okay, that came from ownership. That was, and I think as ownership looks at the situation that they're in, it's because that's the reason, and it's not because of what Kevin Stefanski's doing on game days. It's not because of Andrew Berry didn't have picks to make because of that Deshaun Watson trade. So we can they haven't been perfect by any means, both the general manager and the head coach. But it is perfectly fair to come to the conclusion that they deserve more than one more year, and that's what this trade says, is they have the confidence of ownership to, hey, we're going to make this move, because this move was set up ahead of time, that we're going to make this move, and we're going to be in a position next year to go get a quarterback. And next year's quarterback class looks like there's no Caleb Williams or Drake May or just like that one guy that you're pointing to and saying superstar. But there's a lot of really talented quarterbacks in next year's class, and it'll be fun next season as we watch to see who maybe emerges from that group. But they also drafted Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd, Shedeur Sanders in the 5th. So it'll be really interesting through training camp how that quarterback battle goes. Of course, Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett already on the roster. But just to see how, if either of those two rookie quarterbacks can make a case for why they should be the starter long term. If not, the Browns will have two. There's a good chance both picks will be in the top half of round 1. A chance to go up and get a quarterback and be bold.
I checked out on Tuesday your 2026 mock draft, and I have more questions about the 2025 draft. But because you referenced the quarterbacks in next year's draft, there's a bunch. You have Arch Manning as the number 1 pick, Lenora Sellers number 2, Drew Aller from Penn State going number 5. I guess I should say because people don't know. Number 1, Arch Manning from Texas. 2, Lenora Sellers from South Carolina. You have Aller at 5 out of Penn State. Even as you go through this, I'm sure you have Nussmeier somewhere in there. Yep, he's 16 to the Steelers. Can you break down those guys, including what you've seen from Arch Manning, that you have him number 1 ahead of those other guys already, Dane?
Yeah, and of course, we have a very small sample size from Arch, and if his last name was Smith, he probably doesn't show up in this, so that's part of it. But there's a very good chance he's not even in next year's draft. Both Eli and Peyton were 4-year guys, so we could see him bypass next year's draft, go back, and then we're talking about him for 2027. But in this mock draft, the Saints had the number 1 overall pick. The same Saints that have not drafted a quarterback in the first round since Archie Manning. And it'd be pretty. And if the Saints end up with the number 1 pick, maybe that makes Arch and the Manning family rethink whether they come out or not. But cart before the horse. We'll see how he does this season when he is the guy. That Texas team's going to be loaded this year. They have a few offensive line holes to fill, some new players coming in, but the receiver talent should be outstanding, and Texas should be in good shape. Lenora Sellers was the most exciting quarterback maybe I watched all year last season in college. Just what he did as a dual threat guy with his legs, with his arm. He needs to be a little more polished as a passer just for consistency's sake. But I think that if he takes another step, we'll be talking about him as potentially a top half of round one guy. Drew Aller is interesting. If he would have came out, does he go 2 to the Browns? Do the Browns just not make that trade and take Aller at 2? There's a very good chance that that's what happens. We'll never know for sure, but I think there's a very good chance Drew Aller would have been the number 2 overall pick. I think for his maybe long-term development is probably the right move to go back, just be more consistent with the way he sees the field. Hopefully, no more Tyler Warren, but hopefully the Penn State does a better job of, especially at receiver, having more of a plan of how to push the ball downfield, especially outside the numbers. And then the 2 other quarterbacks, Garrett Nussmeier Fernando Mendoza from a Cal transfer in Indiana. Really excited for him. He's got a lot of interesting tools. Eager to see what Curt Cignetti can do with him for the Hoosiers this season.
There's a lot of stuff that jumps out to me, Dane, but one is looking at what the Giants had to give up to go back and get Jackson Dart. And looking at the Patriots missing out on either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, or theoretically trading down and getting a king's ransom for someone that would want to come up. One of my big takeaways is I think teams in the positions they were in at the end of last year are going to really have to take a longer look at which young guys, this is the best way I can say it without saying lose on purpose, but
right,
which young guys they play in those week 17 and week 18 games. Because I can tell you, I'm intimately familiar with some other franchises that would not have let that happen. That they would not have lost that much value over a game that had very little to do. And I don't know if that's right or wrong. I'm just telling you, I am surprised more teams allow that. I'm surprised both those teams allowed that to happen to them. Have you talked with anybody about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that will be talked about till the end of time. Obviously, if you're picking, or if you're in contention for the number 1 overall pick, there's a chance as a head coach that could be your last game ever as a head coach, and so that's tough. Because you are obviously thinking best case scenario, I'm brought back and we're looking towards next year. But you're also in the back of your mind saying, is this the last game I'm ever going to coach? Not just for this team, but for any team. And so that factors in. Obviously you never try to lose a game. You don't throw a game. But starting young players could potentially, twofold. It helps you get a look at some of the younger players on the roster, but also maybe inches you towards another loss and another higher pick. So look, I think that building by building, the answer to that's going to be a little bit different with how they'll view it, and there's the integrity of the game, but it's also like just smart calculating planning. Like it's kind of a big gray area when it comes to the best way to manage that. And if we see more teams start to be okay losing late in the year, does that mean NFL is gonna say, all right, well, to avoid this, we're gonna get a lottery system for the draft, just like the NBA has? Possibly. So yeah, it's a gray area and something that teams definitely talk about, and it's something that we haven't seen that, like that one team really throw a game where it's obvious and all of a sudden they have to hold on to number 1 pick. But the moment it happens, it'll become a big point of emphasis.
Curious about your thoughts on the Falcons trade for James Pearce, giving up next year's 1. That really jumped out to me during the draft, especially after they had already selected Jalen Walker. And by the way, announced him as an edge. Then they give up next year's 1. I recognize they're getting a 3 back, but James Pearce Jr., is he worth that? Is he worth giving up next year's one to move up like the Falcons did?
Yeah, that was surprising. Not only are you giving up a future one to get into the late first, but you're doing it to get a player with a ton of question marks. And so, if you're the Falcons, it's a situation where they were going to take him at 15. Jalen Walker fell a little bit, so they stayed true to their board, take Jalen Walker, and then saw an opportunity to go also get Pierce, throwing a lot of resources at the pass rush, which they absolutely should be doing. But to trade next year's one for a player who is he was a tough player to talk about through the process because he was not on a lot of boards, put it that way. A lot of teams were out on James Pearce, wanted nothing to do with him. And it's not talent related. It's just like as one scout put it to me, I just want to believe that he loves this. I want to believe that, we're going to get the most out of him. And you don't have to, there are plenty of guys in the NFL that don't love football or don't love what they do every day, but they still put everything they have into it, so they're earning their paycheck. And so there are a lot of teams in the NFL that weren't convinced of that with James Pearce. Obviously, the Falcons were the opposite. They did a lot of work on him and felt comfortable that they were going to get the most out of him, whether they drafted him at 15 or got him later in the first round. So, but again, to trade a future one, because the Falcons are, I know they're thinking we're going to make the playoffs next year, but let's just say they're picking where they are again. That's a 15th overall pick you just gave up for a player with question marks who wasn't a 3-down player in college. So a huge risk to take. I don't know if maybe they felt like we had to make a move. We had to do something. We don't know if we're going to be here next year, if that factored in at all. They'll never say that publicly, obviously, but still a pretty questionable move, a bold move, but a questionable move.
Curious about Jahad Campbell and, to a lesser extent, Will Johnson, Ben Morrison. Campbell, everybody's coming out of the woodworks now, Dane, to say they had him as a top 10 guy, top 5 guy. He went 31.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know you talk to people. There had to be some real concerns about him medically. I think I've seen something where both shoulders and a knee, so what can you tell me about Campbell? And also just curious what you see as his scheme fit at the next level.
Yeah, he had it was both shoulders. He had a shoulder injury in the bowl game that he had surgery on in March. He had the other shoulder, the right shoulder, he had worked on before, and then he had a knee from, I believe it was 2019, maybe 2018, something around there. So medicals were extensive, and some teams were comfortable with them, other teams weren't comfortable. I just in terms of the player and the talent, I thought it was a really interesting fit with the Eagles. And I felt that just listening to Howie Roseman talk after the pick, I feel like I heard him say the word edge more than I heard him say the word linebacker, which is fascinating. And if I hope that this is their answer to Micah Parsons. They have to face Micah Parsons twice a year against the Cowboys, and they said, let's go find our own Micah Parsons, and they identified Campbell as being that guy. I would love to see him in that type of role where you just don't know where he's coming from. You move him around the line of scrimmage. You get real creative with that front seven. He was a pass rusher coming out of high school. He didn't move to linebacker until his second year in Tuscaloosa, where he was really productive this past season at over 100 tackles. But I still think that when you look at the burst to the ball, the range that he plays with, it's easy to get excited about what he does downhill and what he can provide as a pass rusher. So I think it'd be really fun if they use him as kind of their version of a Micah Parsons in that defense.
Well, you're right, because Howie Roseman referenced Penn State like 3 times, and he was talking about Micah Parsons and Abdul Carter. I'll just say this. I don't think we should really compare anybody to Micah Parsons. Like, just from what I see, I think Abdul Carter's fantastic. Mm-hmm. I don't think his change of direction is Micah's either. And I'm just curious. I've seen some clips, Dane, of Campbell rushing the passer. Like the one against Campbell where he dips at the bottom. That looks pretty nice. But that's not, I haven't seen enough to say this guy can be Micah Parsons.
Oh, yeah, I think it's more of an idea than a full-fledged out, proven thing yet. I mean, it's more the role of a Micah Parsons rather than
Right.
this is going to be Micah Parsons. Because you're right, there's one Micah Parsons, and the Cowboys better lock him up before we get too far into this thing, because you're just not finding guys like that very often. He is worth every cent that he gets. But for the Eagles to draft a unique player like this, if Jihad Campbell was strictly an off-ball linebacker and nothing more, I just have a hard time believing Howie Roseman would have drafted him in the first round. I think that the edge presence and what he can do getting after the quarterback is a huge part of why they drafted him in the first round and their idea for what he could be in the NFL.
Dane, is this the only interview you've done before or after the draft where where the guy didn't ask you about Shedeur Sanders?
So far, pretty much, yeah. It's been nice.
It's funny. I got to ask you because you talk to so many people. Did you hear a lot of the same stuff that these other people have reported about the interviews and the pre-draft process? Was that a big part of this?
No doubt. This is a perfect example of how important the spring is for quarterbacks. The fact that Dillon Gabriel was a day 2 pick and Shedeur Sanders wasn't, just that explains everything about how important the interview process is. Just the way you conduct yourself. Quarterback is an intangible position. And unless you are, and people will scream, we draft, or NFL teams draft, criminals and bad people and this and that. And, Shedeur is not that. But quarterback is an intangible position. And if you don't have enough talent and traits, then the juice isn't worth the squeeze. So, yeah, guys that are immensely talented, teams will still roll the dice on those guys, even with some of the question marks. Shedeur Sanders is an average, toolsy guy. I mean, in terms of the tools, they're average. The size, the arm strength, the mobility. He does plenty of good things playing the position. He's tough, he's accurate, he's poised. But I don't think he put enough on film to make you believe that he's going to be a top 15 NFL starter in the league. And so for teams that went through the process with him and he did not, like when you go into the draft process as a prospect and believe you have all the leverage, not the other way around, that's going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. And I think that's what was something that rubbed a lot of teams the wrong way. And I don't think the Browns had any intention on drafting Shedeur Sanders, and then he was still on the board in the 5th round, and they said, you know what? Why not? At this point, if he doesn't work out or if the baggage is too much or whatever, you cut him. He's a 5th-round pick. It doesn't matter. So, I think that the Browns are an interesting landing spot with Dillon Gabriel just drafted in the 3rd round, Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco already on the roster. Odds are we're not going to see them carry 4 quarterbacks. So what will they do? So the training camp battle in Cleveland, this training camp is going to be interesting.
Check him out on social media at DP Brugler. You got to get the beast. It's not too late, believe it or not. You can read all his reports on all the guys you're going to see in the preseason games. I love him. I love talking to him. Love his stuff. Read all of it. Love getting him on the show. Dane, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks, Ross.
It is all about hitting your macros. It's all about protein. It's all about Huel, which is my fuel these days. Absolutely love it. New customers, visit Huel.com/Ross15 today. Use my code Ross15 to get 15% off your first order plus a free gift. The deal is with travel or even just going to pick up my daughters or whatever, it's hard to get a perfectly balanced meal. That's what Huel is, because it contains 35 grams of protein, 27 vitamins, minerals, low in sugar. It's high in protein, contains vitamin C, stupidly convenient. I mean, you already have it ready. You just grab it, crack it, drink it. Cheaper than a coffee, tastes decent. You're looking for the black edition ready to drink. That's the meal in a bottle at Huel.com/Ross15. By the way, Jack, I don't know how much we've talked about the Labatt Blue watch party for the draft last Thursday. That was incredible. They had a ton of Labatt Blue and Labatt Blue Light there. I had everybody drinking it. It was $2 drafts, which is amazing. And every time you bought one, hopefully, you know what? I should have announced at the start to make sure they go to rewards.labattusa.com and then take a picture of their receipt so they can get gear. I love the hoodie that I saw. I love the cooler backpack. Buy beer, get gear, rewards.labattusa.com.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross, it's contract time in the NFL. The 49ers, they give tight end George Kittle a new deal that makes him the highest paid tight end in NFL history. Meanwhile, the Vikings, they gave linebacker Andrew Van Ginkel an extension. The Commanders, they signed kicker Matt Gay. The Packers signed linebacker Isaiah Simmons. And Deontay Johnson, he continues the AFC North tour with the Browns.
That is unbelievable, by the way, in terms of Deontay Johnson. Matt Gay just gets cut by the Colts, gets picked up by the Commanders. Van Ginkel was amazing last year, which is why the Vikings gave him that extra year. But the biggest story here is Kittle, because there had been conversation about him maybe holding out or maybe wanting a new deal. They did put a lot of kind of funny money in that last year of his deal in order to make him the highest paid tight end in the league on an annual average. But hey, you get a third contract in the NFL, you are doing work. Thrilled for him because he does everything. He blocks, he catches, he deserves it.
The Commanders, they are getting a new stadium, and it is on the old RFK site in D.C.
It is unbelievable what a difference a new owner makes. I mean, when I was first in Washington, it was cool to play for that team. Huge season ticket waiting list. To see just how much the fan base eroded. Now they get a new owner. Now they get a franchise quarterback. Now they're getting a new stadium. Washington football is back, and I am so happy for people in the DMV because they love their football team, and they deserve this, including, my family and my nephew Tucker. I'm pumped for all of them. Vodka, in particular, Smirnoff vodka, the world's #1 vodka, an official vodka partner of the NFL, and my official vodka partner. You know why? Because it's delicious, and yet you're not paying a crazy amount. There's no reason to do that. Grab a bottle of Smirnoff at your local retailer and head to Smirnoff.com to find recipes of delicious cocktails that are perfect for game day. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please not share with anyone under legal drinking age. Super Bowl's over. Draft is over. Smirnoff's not over. Smirnoff's getting you ready for the next season, which will be here before you know it. Other than that, I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. It's by far the best Mother's Day gift ever. You're essentially a loser and clueless if you don't get one of these for your mom or your wife. I'm going to that level these days. myfrontpagestory.com, backoffescheduler.com, humanetnyc.com, Sporticulture, Pizza Boy Brewing.